In my book, Sound Sleep, Sound Mind, and on my blog, I've talked and written about the connections between intelligence level and insomnia. In my clinical experience, I've noticed that many people with insomnia have what appears to me to be a higher intelligence, and perhaps I should describe this as the intellectual type of intelligence as opposed to, let's say, emotional intelligence. And I've found that in my clinical discussions, with my patients, that there's a pattern that arises, which is that the individual who has the insomnia has learned to rely on their mental capacity, their skill and articulation, so to speak, with how they think and how they come to decision making and making judgments. And they know themselves to be very good with all of this type of analysis. But they then apply that technique to trying to solve insomnia, which isn't very effective, as the treatment of insomnia requires actually some more emotional intelligence in addition to just pure intellect. And as I've discussed this with many of these patients, there's a general concurrence that yes, these are individuals who tended to capitalize on their intellects, their perhaps higher IQs, doing better in school, getting good grades, and in so doing, that path seems to make them at risk for insomnia because they're spending too much time in the analytic mode and not having what I would call a more balanced view of the thoughts and feelings that they're capable of experience. Now, recently we got a comment on one of the blogs about this issue, wondering, is the same thing relevant in children? And I believe it is, because in my adult patients who are describing this phenomena, many of them reported this issue or problem or strength in some cases in which you are using the mind too much for intellectual matters. Many of my patients are reporting this happened in childhood. They actually remember that very early on in school they recognized how gifted they were, and they kept going down that pathway to utilize their intelligence. Well, and that's great, and that helps them in many other ways, but it also may have been the thing that predisposed them to insomnia, because later in life, instead of strengthening their emotional intelligence, they only felt comfortable strengthening this intellectual side of things. And think for a moment about thinking. People who have insomnia almost always report they think too much. They overanalyze things. And that then would go along with somebody who is very intelligent, very smart, and has that natural capacity. So in my experience, not only do I hear the stories from adults, but when I meet children and teenagers who have insomnia, I often find them to be individuals that have very overactive minds, and many of them are what I believe to be is very intelligent and with higher IQs. So I do think there is a connection there, and it will be interesting one day to find out if it's an actual risk factor in terms of how you can predict whether someone might develop insomnia or not.